This is kind of the first in a little series of safeguarding kind of refresher sessions that we're looking to do between now and Christmas. We've opted to focus on the safeguarding plan for the first session. The next session will be about managing risk in your group activities, and then the final session just before Christmas will be about responding to concerns when they're raised or shared with you as a group leader. Can I just check, people who are here, are you mostly group leaders, group safeguarding leads, and that sort of thing, or
group leader?
Yeah, excellent.
Group leader.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I mean, that's,
leader.
yeah, I mean, it's sort of, we've geared these so that they can, they'll be useful for anybody, but really geared to people who have that role of kind of taking some responsibility and accountability for things at a local level, just kind of being a reminder of what we should be doing, how we should be approaching the issues. So I thought I would start just by giving a quick overview. We are going to look at a quick recap of the basic definitions, what we're talking about when we talk about safeguarding. We're going to look at the role of the safeguarding plan within your group and why it's important, what it does. We're going to look at the resources that are there to help you to create and update the plan. We're going to just recap as well how to raise concerns as a result of that. And then we'll just focus at the end on some kind of suggestions for the sorts of things that you could and should be thinking about over the autumn term. Does that sound broadly okay? Is there anything in there that you were hoping I was going to cover that doesn't appear to be on the agenda? There will be time for questions at the end, so I'll make sure there's plenty of time to address anything you want to talk about. Given your roles, I'm sure you're all very familiar with this, but when we talk about safeguarding, we're talking about the actions that we take in everything that we do to protect children and young people from maltreatment, to prevent anything impairing their growth and development, to make sure that they're growing up in the best circumstances that we can, and take all the action that we can to enable children to have the best outcomes. Oftentimes when we say safeguarding, our thoughts actually go to the kind of reactive child protection elements of that. So there is that reactive element that we tend to refer to as child protection, which is where you are acting to protect a specific child or children because there is a obvious threat to their health or well-being. That reactive stuff is part of the safeguarding sphere, but actually there's a lot more that's encompassed in safeguarding, which is all the stuff that we do proactively as well as reactively. When we talk about responding to concerns, we'll be focusing on the reactive, more child protection, looking at individual children sphere. But when we're talking about a group safeguarding plan, it's not the what if, it's the what do we do to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we are having to act to protect children. Everyone comfortable with that?
Yep.
So we have a local safeguarding plan, which is one of the key documents that you should be using at a local level to manage your safeguarding arrangements in your group or district. So its key function is to build that bridge between all the reams of policies that we have at a national level and what you're actually doing week in, week out in your drafty church halls or community gardens or wherever you happen to be running your group. The policies that we determine nationally tend to talk in very broad terms, and you can't pick them up and follow them and turn them into practice. And that's where the local safeguarding plan comes in. The idea is that you spend some time as a group of leaders responsible for and accountable for what's going on to firstly discuss and agree how you're going to put those policies into practice in your particular setting. It's also about making sure that all of that sets of documents information is collated for volunteers with the key things that they need to know in a single place. it's got an important role in terms of informing the activity risk assessments that you might do. There will be some points where you've agreed some general measures that you're going to take to keep everybody safe that you can just, to some extent, copy and paste into your risk assessment because you've discussed and agreed as a group that that's how you do things. We ask that you update them or at least review them, even if nothing's changed, at least annually. Look at it, make sure it still makes sense. The other thing that we say is if you've had an incident or a near miss in your group, then that would be a very good time to take a step back and reflect on whether the plans that you had in place need updating. And the other thing to say is that they are a shared responsibility. It's one of those things that will get kind of shunted towards you because you're the lead safeguarding, local safeguarding lead for your group or district. Oh, well, that's, your thing because you're the safeguarding lead. Yes, you're responsible for keeping it on the agenda and accountable for making sure that it has been looked at. But the idea that it's something that that person keeps and is in a folder and no one else needs to worry about it is one of the dangers. So once the document is there, it's a record of a discussion you've had amongst all the people who will be responsible for running the activities, but keeping to it and keeping it live and relevant is a responsibility that needs to be shared by everybody who's involved in the group. So what's in the document? We'll go in a minute and look at the template that we've recently updated, which is available on the website. But there are some suggested headings. It's not an exhaustive list. You don't have to stick religiously to what we've put in there, but the key areas that we've identified where you need to have some local discussions and local practice about how you're going to put our policy into action is around how you manage volunteer recruitment and screening. Those are a bit of a given. There's not a lot of flexibility. We know that everybody who is volunteering needs to be a member, needs to have got a DBS if they're volunteering regularly, needs to have references taken up and so on. But who's doing that, who's owning that, is something that you need to discuss and agree locally. There's much more flexibility around what you do about training volunteers and inducting them, having probationary periods, anything like that. And that's something that we do encourage you to have a conversation about among the people that you work and that you lead your group with. So there's all that sort of volunteer management sphere. Then there's working with the young people. How do you manage behaviour within your group? How do you respond to incidents? How do you respond to the needs of the children? How do you work? How do you communicate to keep parents and to keep the young people informed about what's going on? Make sure they turn up to the right place, make sure they're not ill-informed about what's going on, unprepared, wearing the wrong clothes, so on and so forth. All those arrangements about storing and collecting data from young people and their parents, and what you do about photo and video consent, and particularly if there's any concerns that you need to be aware of because you've got looked after children in your group, for example, when that might be not just going against a parent's wishes, but actually putting a child in danger. If we were to, publish their photos online or whatever. Then that reactive stuff about the procedures for dealing with disclosures, incidents and complaints. Again, this isn't somewhere where you've got a lot of latitude to interpret what the policy says. It's fairly open and shut what you do if a child is disclosing to you that they're at risk. But again, it's that thing about making sure that the salient information is there in a form that's digestible for the volunteers, so that should they ever need to draw on it, it's available. And then there's a lot of kind of practical stuff which will be very specific to your group. So they're in there as headings, but we haven't put lots of detail in there saying we suggest the national policy is this, because it will be very distinct to your venue and what you do about snack and biscuits, and whether you've got people with allergies, and whether you are somewhere where running a pioneer group in a community centre where lots of young people will be walking home on their own, or whether you meet in a park miles away from anywhere with lots of elfins who are all going to be dropped off. So all of those kind of practical things need thinking about, and probably need thinking about from a very localized and very discrete to your group sort of a way. So that's broadly, it's not an exhaustive list, but that's broadly what's in the template. And again, as I say, there may be things that you put in there specifically that we haven't thought of, because there are particular issues within your group that, or within your location, that we need to be aware of. Like, you know, I don't know, the enormous motorway outside your meeting venue, or the Triffid patch off to the left of the park that you meet in, or whatever it might happen to be. So just to look at the document, this is the updated version that we published on the website a few months ago, just before the summer. The idea being that we put everything in one place. We've updated it so that it's more consistent with our updated policies and procedures, and hopefully points you to the right places to get more information about it. Also, gradually trying to remove Debs' name as lead safeguarding officer for the organisation and replace it with mine. So if you do come across things, as Jenny did the other day, please tell me, because I haven't found everything with Debs' name on yet, and we need to make sure we've got the right information on there. Just on that, however, safeguarding@woodcraft.org.uk will always get to myself and Leanne. And if for any reason one of us is out of the business, it'll always go to the other. And if for any reason both of us are out of the business, it'll always be picked up by somebody else. So that's usually the most reliable way of getting a response in a timely manner, regardless of what else might be going on in the organisation. Although we're very happy to respond to phone calls as well. From a practical point of view, emailing the safeguarding email, just make sure also that it goes to an inbox where we can make sure that we're collecting and scraping and keeping the details of anything that we need to keep as well. And it's just administratively easier for that, even if you've got me on speed dial. If safeguarding stuff comes into safeguarding, it's helpful for us to comply with our record keeping. So the idea is that the yellow bits of this document are the ones that you will need to put in your details of locally. So on the cover sheet, we suggest that you have who is the local safeguarding lead for the group. If you've got a local health and safety lead that's a different person, put their name there as well, although it's fine for it to be the same person. We suggest you also put the details of your local children's social care. Depending where you are, they'll go by different names. Safeguarding children's boards, there's something different in Scotland, and I've forgotten. Increasingly, particularly in London, you're talking about MASH, which is the multi-agency. Sarah will have to help me. What are they? Multi-agency safeguarding hub. Is that right?
Yeah, it used to be called first response, and that's kind of how I see it in my head. They're the people that you ring up when you've got a kind of query. Is this a big deal? What should I do? So it would be MASH. Yeah, exactly that.
And then you'll also have a local authority designated officer, and they're the people that are responsible for concerns and issues around the children's workforce. So about adults volunteering with children and young people, who you may occasionally find yourself having to speak to. Jenny, you had a question.
Yeah, it was just to clarify, or a suggestion, maybe it's too late. Given that now we have to have a safeguarding lead for each group rather than for the district, and at least in our district, it's a different person in the group, each group. I'm just wondering if the term local safeguarding lead might confuse some people out there, and if it should say local/group safeguarding lead. Am I making sense? Because I read that and went, oh, but we don't have a local one anymore. Now we've got one per group.
I think, and maybe this is something we need to do more to clarify, but given the number of our groups which are lone groups, we've tended to, and we know from experience that talking about things that are done at a district level tends to freak them out, because they go, oh, we haven't got a district. It's, you know, more that we need to do. We've tended to use the phrase local safeguarding lead to encompass the idea that that could be someone at the local level, or it could be someone at the group level. We need to identify that individual for each group. That's absolutely right. However, I know many districts with multiple groups are choosing to have one person as the lead, named lead for all groups, because that helps them to keep things consistent, and they meet in such a way that it's all right, that it's manageable, and that works. So whereas other people are going, well, we meet in different parts of the borough on different nights, and it's not practical. That's also fine. It's horses for courses. I think that's why we've gone down that.
Yep.
Trying to harmonise with the term local safeguarding lead, because we were calling them local safeguarding officers and group and district safeguarding officers and group and district safeguarding leads and all sorts of things. We've tried to standardise the term we're using. If that's a term that's not immediately helpful, we can try and clarify it, and have a glossary or something in our safeguarding hub on the new website. But that's a good.
I think that would be good, just to have a little asterisk and say this could be basically everything you've just said. Thank you.
Cool. That's great. And I was going to talk about that in a moment later in terms of what a local safeguarding plan means as well. Anyway, so this is an example of the inside pages and the templates. So again, the idea is you will focus on populating the yellow bits. We've put our recommended, what national policy and procedure requires, then some sort of prompt questions that you might want to think about, and then a space for what you've agreed you're going to do at a local level, and who's responsible for making sure it happens. Again, I'm not wedded to people using a consistent format. I'm not a complete fascist. If you find it easier to put it into a Word document, if you find it easier to put it into an Excel spreadsheet, if you find it easier to handwrite it in beautiful calligraphy, that's fine, as long as it contains the information that you need and is easily shared with people and is accessible to everyone. But you will see also that we've tried to sprinkle through it where we're talking about a policy requirement. There is a little number to a footnote which tells you where you can find more information about that document, where that requirement comes from. And on the last page, there's details of what all those refer to, because I think sometimes it's quite difficult to know which document you should be going to find out more about that, and that's something we've been trying to improve. The other thing we're trying to do is review and reduce the number of different interrelated policies, because I'm very conscious that particularly in the safeguarding sphere, there's quite a lot of different and interconnected documents that makes it more challenging, but that's a bit of a longer job. So your role as local safeguarding leads, and I'm talking obviously to the local safeguarding leads here, rather than group leaders or group coordinators. You are the people who, on whatever level, whether that's for your group or for your district, need to be familiar with safeguarding contacts. So who are the local MASH or the local Safeguarding Children's Board contacts, and what are the processes and so on that you would need to engage with to escalate a concern. Hopefully, in conjunction with group leaders and with conjunction with a training or volunteer coordinator, if you happen to have one of those in your group or district, you'll have the ability to coordinate safeguarding training locally for volunteers. It's a requirement of our safeguarding policy that people engage in some level of training that is relevant to their role on safeguarding. You will obviously act as a first point of contact for volunteers if they've got concerns, or if they've had a concern shared with them. With the support of the safeguarding team at Folk Office, we would expect that you're the people who will be contacting social care at a local level if you've got children in your group who you believe to be at risk of harm. We'll support you in that, and obviously in an emergency situation, a group leader might need to make a call without you if you're not available at the group night where you happen to where something happens to come to light and it's urgent. But normally we would expect local safeguarding leads to be at least overseeing that process. Making sure that the volunteers who are helping with the group night activities have got access to the information that they need, whether that's the safeguarding plan itself, your local induction checklist, or whatever it happens to be, the safeguarding policy for the organisation as a whole if they need it, and incident forms, disclosure forms, that sort of thing. And then generally to keep safeguarding on the agenda, as I said earlier, to make sure that you're prompting the other leaders that you work with to review the document at least annually, to have that conversation and to keep it in people's minds. It should never be a box we tick. It should be something we embed effectively into everything that we do. Okay. So I think there are a couple of key questions that I'd suggest that you kind of want to resolve when you have that discussion. And it comes back to that thing that Jenny was speaking to earlier about, well, in your district, if you are in a district that's got multiple groups, well, what's the right answer? Is it feasible to have one plan for all the groups? Because you all share a venue, for example, and therefore the issues around coming and going and who's in the building and keeping people safe are going to be very, very similar? Or do you run groups of diverse age ranges and with different needs that mean, or in different venues that mean having one standardized plan that covers everything is impractical? And I think if you're the sort of district that's decided that one person can be your safeguarding lead for all of your groups, it's quite likely that you'll be able to share a common safeguarding plan as well, because that's indicative that you're working in a kind of slightly more joined up way. All districts are not like that. I think, sometimes to take the sort of Lewisham and Greenwich example, I know you've got 3 groups that all meet at the same time in the same place, and your arrangements for keeping the young people safe there are going to be very, very intertwined. But then you've got another bunch of groups up the other end of the borough that meet on a different night in different places, and maybe they need to have their own arrangements, for example. So that's a question that you need to ask for yourselves, and it kind of, as I say, speaks to that thing about, well, do you have a single person overseeing everything across all of your groups, or do you do your own thing on different nights? Connected to that, who is the person who needs to be not solely responsible for making it happen, but responsible for making sure that it happens? That might be the safeguarding lead. It might be the group coordinator, making sure that the venue is open at the right time, or that there's enough people on the rota for the number of children you expect to turn up. Things like membership screening might be down to the membership secretary. There are things that don't obviously fit in anybody's particular domain, like running training for volunteers or inducting volunteers. You need to work out who's going to be making sure, as part of that kind of cooperative effort, that it's being done, that people are being reminded that it needs to be done. Again, what else do the volunteers that you're working with need to put the plan into practice, to make it work on a weekly basis? Are there enough volunteers on the rota? Do you need to identify, I don't know, one volunteer who's going to be supporting specifically around behaviour, or one volunteer who's going to be on the door making sure that strange people don't wander in off the street, or whatever it happens to be relating to your particular group situation? Is there some particular training that everybody needs? Have you got enough first aiders to make activities work, for example? And again, it's kind of the same thing, but the training or support that volunteers need to make it work. And where does that come from? It might be that you can provide that locally. It might be that you need to buy in some first aid training from Red Cross or St Anne's Ambulance or whoever else you use to provide your first aid training. It might mean that there's an ask on us at Folk Office to come and either signpost you to some resources that you can use to run your own training, or to, if we're able to, come and deliver something that will address whatever support needs you've identified. And we're happy to think about doing that, particularly as hopefully some of the barriers to people participating in training online have reduced a little bit, and we may be able to deliver a half-hour training session to you in London without me schlepping down from Manchester. We're certainly very happy to consider that. On a practical point of view, the Google Doc template that I've been showing you is available on from the reporting and record keeping section of the safeguarding bit of the website. I know not everybody is a fan of using Google Docs, so there is also the same document there as a Word template. And obviously, if you want to cut and paste it into something else because that fits the way that you work, then that's great. If you are using the Google Doc, and I get lots of share requests and things in my inbox from people trying to access the risk assessments, you need to create a copy of the document, because you don't want to start editing the one that's on the website, because then it'll be specific to your group, and maybe you don't want the entire organization seeing that. So you need to do that thing of going to create a copy, so that will create a copy that you can then edit. If you want to road test your plan to talk about, have we covered the eventualities, you will look in the safeguarding session, the staying safe safeguarding volunteer training that's on the website. One of the most useful parts of that is a thing about here are some scenarios. What would you do in your local level? It's in your local group. It's quite a good filter to run through some of those safeguarding scenarios. They're really good to just kind of use as informal training. Think about a couple of them at your district meetings or whatever. But if you want to see how watertight your safeguarding plan is, well, here's a thing that has happened in an actual real life Woodcraft group. Does your safeguarding plan tell people how they need to respond if that happened in their group night? So that's a potential way that you can sort of test and explore those plans. Sarah says, love Google Docs. Excellent. So do we. Can we get slides to share at the meeting next week with group coordinators? Yes, we absolutely can. I'm very happy to send them to people, and we will also whack them on the website when the video recording is ready. And I guess the final thing to think about from a practical point of view is how you're going to share it with volunteers. Yes, you can put it in the group library. You can use group to share it with people, but actually, do you want to print it out and make sure it's in the group folder for those of you who still have them? Do you want to make sure that people are ticking to see that they've actually read it, as opposed to just stored it for a rainy day, and so on? And that's again something that you should think about and consider, because but in that situation where there is two of you who run the group and you're there every week, and you've sat there possibly over a cup of tea or something else and filled out the plan together, less of an issue. But in one of those large and cooperatively run groups where you've got a shifting cast of characters who are coming in and delivering a couple of sessions every month, and there's little continuity, that's the point at which I start to get a little bit anxious that all the knowledge about how to respond to a disclosure or an injury or something like that is concentrated in one person, and if they're not there that week, we're screwed. So I think, the bigger your group, the more important that kind of, how are you going to make sure everybody's on board with this, even if they weren't at the meeting. Just finally, I would like to just remind you that whatever we're doing, whatever we're talking about, embedding understanding of safeguarding with our volunteers, the key message is always about making sure that any concern that a volunteer has got about a child or a young person, or about the suitability of one of the adults that they're working with, should always be shared. And that's a kind of, if anybody takes one thing away from reading a safeguarding plan or coming to a safeguarding session or discussing safeguarding as a standing item at a district meeting, it's this. And I make no excuses for banging on about it every time I meet you all. It might be that you've seen something that just doesn't sit well with you. That's fine, and it's fine to share it with your local safeguarding lead, or it's fine to ring me or Leanne up and go, just checking, what should we do about that? And lots of the conversations we have with volunteers are precisely that. We're never unhappy to have that conversation with people. Well, sometimes we are unhappy. We're never unwilling to have that conversation with people, perhaps I should say. So if people take away one thing from reading the safeguarding plan, that would be it. So for the autumn term ahead, we've scheduled this session here because it's the kind of time that we'd expect that groups might be thinking about moving back indoors after meeting outdoors for the last few months, or starting up their face-to-face meetings properly again. There may be new people, there may be new young people, there may be new volunteers coming on. You're all still in a kind of very much a recovery and rebuilding phase after, I think, as I've said before, the biggest disruption to Woodcraft Folks activities since probably the Second World War. And it's not to be underestimated how much work that is to get back just to where you were before all of this. But I think making sure that you, as predominantly as local safeguarding leads, are keeping stuff on the agenda about how we build not just an effective space to do things with young people in, but a safe space to work with young people in a way that supports our aims and principles is really important. And you're key in kind of making sure that that stuff is kept on the agenda. Even in a normal year, this would be the kind of time that reviewing up and updating your local safeguarding plan is an excellent idea as you start, inducting new people from September and so on, and having those conversations with the team of people who are running the sessions. We will ask you to share a local safeguarding plan with you when it comes to re-register the group at the end of the year. If that's got a recent date on it, that will give us even more confidence that you're all over it. And if it's updated for the group that you're running now rather than the group that you were running 18 months ago, then that's an excellent thing. The other thing that is coming, and that we'll be talking to group coordinators and safeguarding leads around in the next couple of months, is the need to actually deliver on the thing that's been in our rule book for years, about everybody doing a level of safeguarding training. It's one of the things that our insurers are quite rightly asking questions about. What we are suggesting people do is complete a very straightforward, short, introductory training course that's been staged by the National Youth Agency. So it's applicable to all youth working settings. So I think it has that additional stamp of being not our own homegrown thing. It would be fantastic if people could start to have a look at that, register for the training, and do it. It's any of you who've had the kind of job where people ask you to do compulsory training before you do things will recognize the format. I'm not going to lie and suggest that it's going to be the most impactful training of your life, but in terms of building this picture that we are an organization that takes accountability around safeguarding seriously and are therefore a safe organization to provide insurance cover for, that kind of external accredited evidence is really important. you can go onto the NYA's website and find it, but it's easier. We've put a link straight from the safeguarding training page to it. It would be fantastic if people wanted to go and try out that course now, perhaps give us some feedback on it and how it works. If you know what you're doing, if this is not entirely new territory for you, I'm sure you can do it within an hour or so. And it gives you a nice little PDF certificate at the end. It is a requirement that will be starting to be rolled out to our volunteers. So if you want to get ready and go, and if you want to particularly support new volunteers to get to provide some confidence that they're on board with safeguarding and are familiar with the basic territory, then that would be an excellent place to go. More widely, as I said earlier, we're happy to think about tailoring future sessions like this to training needs that you share with us. Please tell us if there's something you desperately want some training on. You can bet your bottom dollar you're not the only person in the country who will value training on that. And I think as you start to recruit new volunteers again, after probably a bit of a fallow period, it's a good idea to think about what do you do locally to do that kind of induction of new volunteers. Do they have a buddy? Do you have a meeting with them 3 months in and go, does it all make sense? Or however you choose to handle it locally. As I said at the beginning, we've got webinars scheduled in until Christmas, and then I will listen to what people feel that they want training on next to schedule, I hope, sort of broadly monthly sessions of this sort. We're looking at managing risk and risk assessment next month, and responding to concerns on the 8th of December. So if you want to either come to those yourselves or direct other volunteers towards them,